Hello, nice to see you as well.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course, happy to.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We've got a bit of a chat here. Let me just kind of pull it up. If, uh, if, if you've got the chat open there, feel free to kind of just put live in the chat kind of where you're joining us from. Here we go. I've got it open. I can just say hi. Hi, Skai, and I'm coming in from Vancouver. Where are you joining us from today, Clara?
I am joining from, it would be a lie if I said Montreal, so just outside of Montreal, Quebec.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, great.
Oh, we have another friendly from Montreal.
Well, yeah. And today we're here to kind of chat all about kind of employee well-being and kind of the the relationship between kind of well-being, recognition,
Yeah,
and kind of the measuring kind of the ROI on these programs, right? And
yeah.
how they can kind of impact the business. Um, as people are kind of joining in, do you want to do a quick introduction on yourself? I think a lot of the audience kind of knows me, but
Of
yeah,
course.
thank you, Kyle, for putting up kind of Clara's kind of background here.
Of course. Well, hello everyone. My name is Clara. As I've mentioned, I live just outside of Montreal in a very small city. And I'm so happy to be here today to be talking about this. I am very passionate about this topic. I'm Senior Partner Relationship Manager at LifeSpeak. I work with partners to integrate the different LifeSpeak solution into their well-being programs. And before that, I actually joined LifeSpeak by way of acquisition, and I was a a performance manager at Lift Session. So I was really working closely with directly with clients and businesses to make sure that we were building well-being programs that were extremely successful and had a direct impact and measured with success. And I'm especially passionate about this because I come from a fitness background, and as a lifelong athlete, I care a lot about the connection between well-being and just overall performance. So I love working with organizations to make sure that wellness is actually something that feels natural and just part of the everyday culture and not just a one of or check the box.
Awesome. And can you tell us a little bit about your organization, LifeSpeak, so folks have a little bit of understanding about what the organization does?
Of course. So Lightspeak was founded in 2001. We started originally as a talk shop and we were going in grocery store. It's a Toronto-based organization. So if you are from Toronto, you might be familiar. Uh, we were going and doing mental health workshop in grocery stores. That then evolved into something else, and we went full digital in the later years, a little bit of ahead of its time, as you can imagine. Early 2000 to talk about mental health and resilience was not as hot as a topic as it is right now. And currently, we offer digital support and with expert-led content in various topics, such as basically the whole person well-being. So we cover topics such as mental health, fitness, nutrition, substance use, caregiving, family care, financial health. We touch on a lot of different topics that just englobe the total well-being of a person, and we really personalize to each of those unique needs for no matter where you're at in your life. It's super easy to implement and scalable, and for a lot of different organizations, no matter the size or the industry that they're in.
Awesome. Okay, so today's topic, we're going to get into kind of well-being and kind of its role in kind of the impact that it can have kind of on the employee journey and employee kind of engagement, employee retention. I'd love to kind of start with just kind of like understanding like what are wellness programs, right? I think there's a lot that kind of like goes into kind of a wellness program
Mhm.
and a number of different elements. You touched a little bit on your background as kind of like being a little bit from kind of the fitness world, but that's probably just one element, right? To to the wellness overall kind of program. So, can you touch a little bit on kind of what goes into a wellness program?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you've mentioned, fitness is really just one pillar. However, we do know that fitness is a pillar, but everything always goes back to your mental health, and your mental health can be expressed in many different ways. So that's your stressors, that's going to be your anxiety, your financial health, it's going to be your relationships, your family, your life at home. And basically, a wellness program is going to be something that is normally put, and it can vary very much on the organization. Sometimes it's going to be the people lead that is going to do this, sometimes it's HR, sometimes you're going to have someone dedicated to benefits that is going to be taking a look at those programs. Depending on the industry and the size, it can very much depend on which who takes lead on setting those programs up. Often it's going to be grouped with point solutions, with a well-being platform, with a recognition platform such as Guusto. It's going to be a mix of different pillars to create really a wellness program to make sure that we are touching on more the human aspect of the human being on the employee side, and not just on the performance aspect of things.
Okay. And so at your organization, LifeSpeak, what sort of programs does your company focus primarily? Like what do you think the weighting is between kind of kind of the variety of programs that the organization offers?
Yeah, so the LifeSpeak solutions on its own are normally going to be a segment of the wellness programs, that so we are integrated either, and I say wellness, it can be well-being, it really depends of the organization how they prefer to call it.
Okay.
But that's really, we integrate seamlessly into one of those programs so that it's a tool, and we are a lot more focused on the prevention aspect of things. So we're not really treating the, how can I say, like the crisis moment. So we're not trying, for example, to replace an EAP. That's not something that we touch. We're in the prevention and education aspect of the house, if you want. And by, we're trying to avoid an end user, for example, or an employee getting, for example, a diagnosis about their ADHD for their child, to go on
Okay.
Google and go down that rabbit hole. We want them to use LifeSpeak as a source of truth, because we really work with top of their field experts so that they can provide information that is up to date. And we have a content team that is very dedicated to making sure that the content we are sharing is actually up to date with laws, regulation. As we know, research moves so fast. What you can find, for example, on Google is not necessarily the most up to date. It might be just someone who is pushing for more marketing. So we're really making sure that the content we are displaying and that is tied in the wellness program is actually a solution that we offer. And depending on which one, for example, if you're interested more in caregiving, on the mental health aspect, or on the fitness, we have different solutions that are offered as well.
And so I'm just going to kind of dig in there though, like as an organization, where do you think kind of like most companies split in terms of like their priority? Do you think it like when they come to you as like a general population, do you think
Mm-hmm.
when they say, hey, we want to institute a well-being program or wellness program, do you
Mm-hmm.
think it's kind of like 50-50 in terms of like kind of fitness programs and mental health programs, or uh, give us the lay of the land there? What does it look like?
I would say that the main topic, and this is coming up in every single conversation,
Yep.
whether it's with direct sales, whether it's with active clients, mental health is something that is the key pillar for everything, and it's a really nice entry point. That being said, I would say that the easiest to implement in your wellness program is definitely going to be something more along the lines of fitness, for example. Is, and think about your either hybrid or fully remote workforce. That's probably the easiest one to integrate, because so people are always looking for that additional benefit. It's one that is super easy to communicate, and then it's a really nice entry point. That being said, for example, in the fitness solution that we offer, we do have some segments about mental health. So each of our individual product lines are going to have tied into mental health. So if the entry point is going to be fitness, we do tie in and take care of also the mental state of it, and we tie a lot of it back to mental health. I would say that 90% of our requests are coming from mental health. And even if it's a need for a caregiving solution or a substance use solution, it all comes back to the mental health. So, someone that is experiencing some substance use issues or with their management, it reflects more in depression and anxiety and stress. Same with caregiving, right? If you're caring for an adult or an aging parent, the stress that you're feeling is actually related to your mental health. So everything is always tied back to mental health and a big focus in any of the wellness program that we have with our clients currently.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we've got the lay of the land. We understand a little bit about kind of what wellness programs are, and what kind of most clients are kind of reaching out to your organization, in terms of kind of what they need help with, right? And mental health kind of being at the top of the list.
Mhm.
Um, why do some organizations kind of overlook wellness as a business priority? And what do you think is kind of stopping them from instituting these programs?
I think previously benefits it overall and not just like wellness and but benefits in general were viewed more as a cost and not necessarily as an investment.
Okay.
Um, so we want direct results. We want to launch something, pay for something, and we want results within the next 3 months. And I don't think that's the proper way to actually view wellness programs in general, right? They were seen as a nice to have and not necessarily tied to the performance or the business success that was tied to it. There was a lot of focus on the outputs, such as like the targets and the processes, and not necessarily about the human being that is your employee. So, especially in this era of a lot of hybrid or fully, I personally work fully remote, right?
Hmm.
My personal life is actually so intertwined with my work life that to create a distinction between the human aspect of it, between the performance, is actually unrealistic. So, I think it was overlooked before because we didn't see it that way. And not to talk about it again, but since the pandemic, I think it's been more and more clear that it's really intertwined together and there's not really a way to create a distinction between the two. Since actually the pandemic, 50% of Canadians actually report that their mental health has declined. So we've seen more and more of a need, and when your mental health is affected, it affects your performance at work. So I think there's a bigger need now ever than before because people are actually voicing the need as well.
Hmm.
um, and previously it was just not something that was talked about at all, even in the workplace.
And so, have do you think that more organizations since the pandemic, like there's been kind of more investment or more of an awakening from organizations saying like, hey, like this is something that we need to kind of invest in.
Mm,
I think the challenge for a lot of organizations, right, is whether it's wellness programs or any sort of HR program, right, like recognition programs, benefit programs, is that you can't do it all, right? Like you can't
no.
just say, hey, we're going to just take like all of these dials and just dial everything to 100%, right? Like we
Yeah.
have to kind of like pick and choose, and it has to kind of like fit. Um, it has to kind of like fit our culture, right? And so
Hmm.
maybe if if we're a gym company, we're going to really invest in our fitness programs because that kind of really fits our culture, right? Now, as an overall kind of theme since the pandemic, I think there's probably been a big awakening to like, hey, we need
Agree.
to kind of invest in mental health because if not, then our employee base is just not going to be able to kind of show up to work,
Hmm.
and that's going to have dramatic like business impacts in terms of being able to like deliver results and whatnot.
Yeah.
But has that continued, kind of as we've come out of the pandemic? Have we, kind of seen that, uh, as we've gotten further and further away from the pandemic?
I think the pandemic actually brought another thing. What created a big shift in the market is definitely that with the pandemic, I think it was an opportunity for a lot of people that were close to retiring. So think more the boomer generation that actually made the move and decided to retire because it was a perfect opportunity to do so. So since then, I think that there's been a big shift in the workforce demographic as well,
Yep.
that also created that importance. And this is something I'm deeply passionate about. That shift in the workplace is definitely because we have more millennials that represents around 1/3 of the Canadian workforce, as well as Gen Z are 20% currently in the market. And by 2035, we're expecting 35% of the market that is going to be in the workplace is going to be Gen Z. And what is super important about those two groups and why I'm mentioning that is because 80% of Gen Z and millennials actually spent either time or money in their health in the last year. That can be represented in going to therapy, paying for a gym membership, seeing a nutritionist. It can be really, it's something that is so important, and also important in the way that they pick their employer and the, why they would stay within a specific organization. So that's a huge switch that we've seen in the market in the past few years. It's been already 5 years since the pandemic. I can't believe it's already been 5 years. But in 5 years, there's been that huge shift in the workforce. And even more important than that is that in like a decade, just think about how many millennials are actually going to be in leadership roles when this is a big focus for them. So setting that foundation for something that is really important for those two generation is going to be very, very important for the wellness programs, definitely.
And those generations, I mean, they are often looking for more than just a job, right? Like they're
Oh,
looking for
totally.
organizations where, kind of they align with kind of the core values and the mission of the organizations, where they feel like their contributions kind of matter, that they
Hmm.
that really that they kind of have colleagues that they can really enjoy working with, and they belong. In fact, it was a survey kind of put out by Lattice where I think it was last year. I remember reading it. Was if the they didn't, it was a survey of a bunch of millennials. If they didn't feel like they belonged to the organization, they were twice as likely to leave the organization, which was
Hmm. It's
that
crazy.
that's a big hit to the retention, right? And so you start to think about kind of like, well, what drives belonging in the organization, right? And then you start thinking about kind of some of the wellness programs. You start thinking about kind of peer-to-peer recognition programs, right? Getting people doing collaborative team building events, fitness programs, peer-to-peer recognition, but also working on projects together, right?
Hmm.
And whatnot. So, what sort of trends are you seeing now that are kind of really happening in the wellness space that are driving people towards kind of investing in wellness programs?
I think there's a for the, I think HR has always been important, but I think HR is now being seen more as a strategic approach to employee retention, reducing turnover rates. So it's bringing actually a place at the table that I don't think was necessarily as big as it was before, because they do recognize that. And thinking about that, if you there's a huge trend with the younger generation that is job hopping, right? We won't see as many people that have been for an organization, the same organization for 20 years, right? So that's a big trend that we've been seeing, and retention of those employees is becoming more and more important. It costs so much time and so much money to actually have one employee that is leaving an organization. So not only to find the right employee to add to your team, but also training them and making sure that they're properly onboarded. And it just takes a lot of time and money overall. And if we see a reduction in that turnover that is happening due to having a solid wellness program, yes, it's wellness program. It is also, as you've mentioned, anything that is related to the people that you work with. There's a very, very strict relation to your manager. So having the buy-in from your manager as well for the wellness program and leading with example for the wellness for the managers with wellness programs becomes such a big trend that HR and leadership are pushing for their managers actually to leverage and talk about the wellness programs so that the employees actually feel like they belong, and it's important for them to actually talk about it too. Sorry about that. So this is definitely trends that we're seeing currently in the market, and yeah, I think it's becoming more and more important for that specific reason.
How do you get, I mean, managers, this is a challenge here internally,
Yeah.
with recognition programs. Like, managers are so busy, right? And
Hmm.
they got their job to do. They're managing in
Other
their
people.
teams. They've got like their own work to do. They're managing up to their bosses. in frontline environments, we serve a lot of frontline organizations, thinking kind of healthcare, retail, manufacturing. They're often in environments where they're dealing with customers as well themselves.
Mm-hmm.
How do you put something else on their plate where, now you're asking them to, in our case, recognize employees or hold their teams accountable to recognize their colleagues, or in environments where, potentially, they're a district manager and you're asking them to hold their teams accountable to, be
Mm-hmm.
recognizing their colleagues in your environment where it's wellness programs. You're asking them to kind of participate in those wellness programs or demonstrate participation in mental health training, or what have you. How how have you found success in communicating with managers, getting buy-in from managers, getting participation,
Yeah.
just getting the message, and yeah, just getting through to managers?
I think there's two. I'm going to answer these questions in like two distinctive points. So the first one would definitely be that, it starts from the top. So no matter what, it's really the top of the pyramid. So think about like the CEO that is leading with example. Or for
Yeah,
example, at LifeSpeak, what we do is we have Take a Breath Day. So once a quarter, it's company wide. It's a random day. It's not a holiday. And we really especially love when our CEO decides that it's actually extending a long weekend, for example, but it's actually a day that everybody needs to be off and we can all be connected. It's just a way for them, and we call it Take a Breath for the simple reason that it's really take the time for you and focus on making sure that people are taking time off to actually recharge their batteries and do something else. So this is definitely something that we've seen that it builds into the culture, right? Your CEO is going to be the message and the culture of your company. So having them lead with example, that
cool.
kind of trickles down and creates that ripple effect, if you want, on managers. The other thing, and a great motivator that we've seen, is that when a manager actually leads with example, one of the main motivator that you can give them is actually when your employees feel recognized and that they feel supported, they're actually becoming higher performer, right? And when your manager are actually reporting on the performance of their team, they want their team to actually perform. So a nice motivator that we've seen is like, if you want to feel and you want higher performers within your team, lead with example. So that normally tends to be a really good motivator for managers, that we've seen in the industry, or any industry, honestly. When their team performs better, when they feel recognized, they perform better, they feel a sense of belonging. It just helps employees go that extra mile, right? So when you value what you do and your culture is great and you enjoy what you do, you don't mind adding those few extra hours to wrap up your day, where everybody wins at the end of the day, right? The employers are happier, the employees, sorry, are happier, and then the employers are happier as well.
So when you're communicating to managers, you really lean into kind of the impacts that it'll have on their team, is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
definitely. And
And
sharing that hard data with the softer data, I would say, becomes critically important. So especially a manager normally prefers the hard data, such as like, okay, reduce turnover, reduce absenteeism, and presenteeism. And just this little segue to presenteeism, this one is probably the hardest to actually measure. But as a manager, it's like pulse surveys, like how is your energy, how's your focus at work, and just managers doing some quick check-ins. That's a good way to measure how your employees are actually showing up to work. Are they distracted with something else? Are they, so that's quick things that a manager can do to check the pulse on their team. And then the software data is going to be just overall the feedback from the employees about the wellness programs that are in place, or how they feel as well about the workplace or the culture, right? So giving a voice, I think, is becoming more and more important as well.
cool. Love that presenteeism. I've never. It's like the reverse of like absenteeism. What we found worked really well, and maybe this, you've kind of used similar strategies on your side, and maybe this kind of helps the audience, but we use often kind of just a crawl walk run mentality. Um, And
Mm.
so, rather than trying to help the entire organization roll everything out at once, is like, hey, let's focus in with kind of like a smaller group of managers. Let's try
Yep.
to build some success stories with, specifically with like recognition programs. Like,
Yeah.
are there some areas within specifically if it's like a larger organization, are there some managers that we know are going to be really good with recognition? Can we roll out the program to them initially, and just demonstrate that, like, hey, this is this is going to be really powerful. Get their testimonials, get their kind of case studies, their results, demonstrate to the rest of the organization. So it's not just like us as the supplier, or even,
Mm.
I love your kind of, your talk track around like, hey, it needs to start with the top. Leadership needs to be involved in the program. They can't just kind of like roll out a program and say, hey, everybody else needs to use this, and we're going to do something totally different over here.
Exactly. And even further than that, I think what we've seen the most success with is that when we are launching, for example, those programs, we're asking managers, okay, who are like your top performers that in a few months, a year, 2 years are going to become managers? Who are like your silent leaders within it? Every single team has that person that leads, even if they're not a manager, right? And you know exactly who I'm talking about within your team. You know where I'm coming from. And we ask those managers to assign that specific individual to be like a wellness champion. So to lead
Mm.
with example, so that there's a not just the manager doing it, but also someone from the team, and creating that team of like being advocate for wellness and sharing words, sharing the words about the benefits that are available. So we've seen great success with leveraging those employees that are on their way of becoming a manager, because when they do transition into that manager position, they're already advocate for the benefits that you've put in place. And I think it's very important to know that your wellness programs are not a campaign. It's part of your culture, right? It's a long-term vision. It cannot be something that, and that's always something we are a big advocate at for LifeSpeak, is don't launch for 1 year. 1 year is too soon to actually know the real results and the real impact. It has to be over 2 3 years, and have a clear goal of what does it mean in 2 3 years to be a successful wellness program, not just in the immediate 6 months. You can have shorter term goals, but you need a longer term vision and a different definition between the close and the longer goals.
I love that. I'm going to come back to that, but this is really interesting. We've never done that with kind of identifying some of those silent champions, high performers that are kind of growing into manager roles. How do you specifically, once you've identified them, how do you shine a light on their stories? How do you kind of pull those out and make sure that, kind of their commitment to wellness, their commitment to recognition is being kind of highlighted to the broader team, to the broader kind of
Mm.
organization? How are you doing that?
A really nice way to do it is either for the manager to highlight that champion, if you want. For the sake of this conversation, let's call them wellness champion. That's normally the vocabulary that we recommend using.
Cool.
Um, you know, having the manager or having some peers as well acknowledge, right? So that across teams and across departments that there's a collaboration, and having in each of those departments, having, yes, the wellness champion, but those peers that are influence and sharing, and encourage the manager encouraging their peers, like the other employees, to actually share their story about how that person influenced, so that you're recognizing as well that high performer, and the likelihood of your high performer actually bragging about them, spreading the word, is a lot less likely, right? High performers tend to be performing in more like in the back seat and just producing a lot, but not necessarily screaming it at the top of their lungs. So you want to have either the manager or their peers share those success stories, whether it's with upper management. One thing that we often do as well as I speak, like internally as an organization, and one thing that I love to apply is sharing the word. When someone does something well in my organization, I'm actually going to reach out directly to their manager and let them know, and that creates like that movement effect of lead by example, share the word with either their manager, their direct manager, but also when you share that feedback directly with that person, it's kind of like giving to the next person, right? They're so much more likely to just engage and do it with the next person that they see engage with the program.
So you, as the vendor, though, are kind of providing those recommendations, those kind of communication guidelines to the client,
Yep.
and then kind of hoping that that kind of happens, or are you kind of meeting directly with any of those managers, facilitating any sort of lunch and learns? Are there any sort of specifics
Mhm.
that you're kind of going a little bit deeper on to like actually implement, like just ensuring like that this is built into the process to make sure it actually happens?
One thing that we love using internally is OKRs for short and objective key results for long, to make sure that you have a clear definition of what success looks like. I've referred to this before, but having a clear understanding of like the checkpoints and what success means to the organization that you're working with, that often falls on the account managers on our team that is going to set up those plans, depending on how much communication we're capable of having and what other strategies they're currently deploying. So obviously we know that communication is probably the biggest challenge of any organization.
Yeah.
So supporting them, whether it's going on site, doing some fair and help with communication, whether it's setting up, some Slack messages or Teams messages that they can send, creating a group of wellness program. And depending on what the bigger objective of their wellness program is, we can set up very clear key results that we would focus on, for example, for the shorter term, but also the longer term period.
Cool. And okay, so now I'm going to come back to, this is great, Clara. I'm really enjoying this.
I'm
you,
glad. I'm really enjoying this too.
you mentioned having kind of a longer term time horizon, right? So beyond kind of like a 1 year kind of time horizon. Hey, is this wellness program working? Yes, no, binary. All right, we need to, CFO comes in, shut this thing down. We
Yep.
haven't had any sort of results. Um, it's still good to have some goals in place, but we need to have a little bit of a, kind of a bit of a longer term time horizon, 2 3 years. Um, what what are those kind of key results, 1 2 3 years? How do we think about kind of measuring the ROI of a wellness program so that we can have those conversations with the CFO? How
Mhm.
does LifeSpeak think about positioning um, the impact of wellness programs? I had a look at some of the case studies on your site. I saw that you've got some great clients, including
Mhm.
Air Canada is a client of yours.
Mhm.
Um, so uh, talk me through some of how you position some of those key results, both internally to your clients, but also externally to prospects.
Yeah, of course. So one of the biggest thing that we've seen come back more and more in conversation is we've been getting so many claims, so many sick days, so many, like there's a lot of those. A CFO and someone who is more on the hard data is going to look at those numbers. This is costing me money, right? So in order to change the vision of it's not costing you money, the money that you're investing is actually creating, it's an investment longer term for your employees, identifying what is the biggest pain point, and part of that discovery is when you're talking with the client or the prospect, really doing a great discovery of what is the biggest pain point that they have currently within their organization, whether it's disability claims or stress related think burnout or anything of that sort, claims, sick days, absenteeism, turnover, identifying specifically what is a pain point, and this is really a keyword, pain point, within the organization, so that your objective and your key results can be directly tied into improving that pain point. um, and that can look so different for so many different organizations. It really depends of your size, it depends of the engagement. And I have to say, like, deploying some a wellness program in a smaller group is normally way easier because the channels of communication are smaller and everybody knows everyone by name. In a bigger organization, for example, such as Air Canada, it's going to be a little bit different and the objectives are going to be very different than a smaller group. So in terms of like net example, it could look like reducing turnover by 1%, right? Something that can be measured, and you want to have something that is measured associated with a clear deadline as to when you want this to be measured, right? So that if you're halfway through and there's nothing that changed, it rings a bell. Okay, what can we actually do to overcome this before we reach that deadline?
Okay. Okay. So talk to me. Air Canada is a really interesting example because a lot of our audience, a lot of our customers are similar to airlines in that they have some folks that work like you and I, kind of at desks, at
Yeah.
computers, office environments and whatnot.
Hmm.
But a big part of the workforce is
On the
out on the
ground.
front line, right? And so like
Yeah.
they're working out on airplanes. They're kind of fixing airplanes. They're servicing customers kind of in the airports, and so they're out in frontline environments, and they're larger organizations. So talk to me a little bit about kind of what you see in terms of like wellness programs for kind of organizations like that typically have kind of like frontline workforces. Where do they typically kind of come to an organization like LifeSpeak for help, and what sort of key results are they typically looking for?
So, for example, like a lot of those bigger organizations, what they're trying to achieve and what we can report back, for example, they have access to the mental health and resilience solution that we have available. So, we cover a lot of different topics such as stress, family management. We cover a lot of things that touch on resilience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, one of the big thing that we're capable of reporting on is actually what are the main stressors for your employees. So in terms of the topics, is it stress that they're looking up? Is it daycare that they're looking up? Is it you? So that way you have a lot more insight as to what your population is actually experiencing and what your employees are facing currently in their life. Again, it can change very quickly, and you have to meet the employees where they are right now. You cannot expect them like in 2 years. You have to really meet them where they are on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis. It can change very quickly. If there's a switch in your population as well, it can vary. So bringing that insight to the employer and sharing like, hey, just so you know, like there's a lot of stress. One of the main topic that was researched is stress management or burnout management. We can actually report back on that data and share with the client like, hey, maybe this is something that you want to take a deeper look at and maybe invest into. I don't know whether it's in recognition or into like more the reward, like if someone does and perform well, maybe add an extra day off at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So supporting those aspects, or if for example we see that there's a big need in caregiving, right, we have something that we can support with, and maybe it looks like supporting more the new parents or the older caregiver aspect of it. So based on the data that we report back, we're capable of supporting the pain points and come up with bigger strategies in regards to those. So one of the main thing that has been coming up more and more recently, once again, not to come back to this, but the generation, right? The millennials and Gen Z are starting to think about building their families, and it's what their age group is currently doing. So women's health has been a big, big, big focus for a lot of industries and a lot of employers that we work with. So supporting and what can we do to support? So does it mean that we produce more content to share with that employer, create campaigns that are specific to women's health? Right now, June is Men's Health Month, so we've set up a lot of campaigns for that we set up for a lot of our clients. This is being shared and broadcast across their organization so that we're really targeting different objectives that they might have for their wellness programs.
This is so cool. Like what your organization is able to provide, and this kind of like ties into my next question, which is around kind of like what does like a wellness strategy look like, and a lot of it ties back to the data that you're able to provide, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe we shouldn't necessarily just come up with a strategy kind of out of the gate, but rather let's implement some something a little bit more kind of like generic,
Mm-hmm.
and run that for a little bit before we get a little bit more kind of precise around what's important to our employees as the data kind of like starts to come in around kind of what's really challenging our workforce. And tell me if I'm off here, and this kind of
No.
might tie into like why you need kind of 2-3 years to really start to build
Yeah.
that roadmap for your wellness program.
Yeah. And I feel like in terms of measuring success, I think it's also important to give your employees a voice. You need to ask them like what support are you looking for, and what, okay, not everybody and not everyone is going to use the benefit, and that's normal, right? It's part of the process. It's part of anything that you launch ever. It's kind of like throwing a party and expecting everybody to show up. It's never going to happen. You really need to make sure that, don't focus on necessarily utilization at first, but doing pre and post surveys. We do have our own specific on like our different platforms, but if you can do it internally with your own teams, like how do you feel about having this? How do you like giving them a try as well, and not shutting them down if it's not used at the number that you wanted within a year is super important, right? Because your population needs also might increase or change or decrease, but there's a lot of things that you can do with that data as well. For example, we know that one of the research we've done internally based on reporting and everything that we track at LifeSpeak is that 88% of the LifeSpeak users report that they have greater confidence in managing their well-being after using our solution. So when you feel you have all the tools in your toolbox to actually take care of your well-being, you can actually show up better at work, and you can actually recommend it to other people. You can actually talk about it, and when you talk about it, it allows other people that might not be using it to actually use it, right? So
Mm,
it's super important to have those measure of success in place too.
interesting. And being a little bit biased here as a recognition company,
Yeah.
I'd love to get kind of your take on kind of where um, where kind of recognition you've seen kind of recognition weave into wellness programs, and obviously kind of our two organizations have only just kind of cross paths, so we haven't kind of
Hmm.
done a whole lot of work together, but perhaps you've partnered and seen kind of other recognition programs you know blend into kind of your program in the past. But talk to me a little bit about how your customers have requested recognition programs, and how you see those kind of like fitting into wellness programs, and as well, like how um, you know we've talked a lot about and seen customers request reward programs to incentivize their wellness programs,
Mm.
right? And like, hey, I've got this wellness program, and I'm trying to get people to participate in less on the mental health side, but more on like the physical health
Yeah.
side. Like, I'm
Yeah.
trying to get people to like bike to work, or
Yeah.
kind of show up for these team events. I just need some rewards to run some draws or get people kind of involved in that. I'm not sure if that's been kind of your experience as well.
It's definitely been our experience. I feel like fitness is unfortunately like a league of its own, because if you're not someone, for example, who grew up athletic or played sport in your life, or you're already starting way behind. So, for example, our solutions are tailored for like that 95% of the population that actually despise working out or being active. We're making it super easy and accessible for that population. So,
Yeah.
having that incentive and that reward that is an added, it's kind of like the carrot at the end of the stick, where it's like, okay, I'll give it a try. And at some point, the more you're active, the more you're going to crave it. It's kind of like eating healthy, right? The more that the first few times that you're eating something healthy, you're not like, oh my God, this was wonderful. You're probably, not seeing the results right away, but as you start to feel better, that you start to sleep better, that those things, it's kind of like starting the wheel. So I think reward and incentives are so important to for those people that are a little bit more reticent, I would say, to like get started. It's like the first step. It really facilitates that first step to get into it. And then it's so cool for people that are already active. They're like, nice, I'm getting recognition for things that I'm already doing that was previously unnoticed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit of a flywheel there, right?
Yeah.
Kind of to get things turning, and then it kind of gets going. But uh, now talk to me. I mean, we touched on it briefly. Kind of the importance of kind of belonging at an organization, right? And this is
Mm.
where kind of both top-down programs like managers recognizing kind of their teams, um, but even more so like peer-to-peer programs, right? And having and typically what we see at organizations is that these are like non-monetary programs,
Hmm.
with rewards sprinkled in the form of, hey, if you've really participated a lot in making a lot of kind of shout outs or nominations over the course of the week or month or something like that, maybe you've earned some rewards, or maybe there's a weekly or monthly draw where they kind of pull some of those shout outs, and there's some rewards for that. But for the most part, those programs are non-monetary.
Hmm.
But have you seen recognition kind of play a role in kind of the overall kind of like balance of a wellness program?
Yeah, I think it's just helping. I feel like the recognition aspect is really taking it to the next level. So it's really something that we've seen added on top. We don't have, for example, like something built in for rewards. We can support and offer recommendation, but it's not something that we have built in within our own solutions and product individually, right? So we often look to have partners on that front and we refer those out. But that additional support just helps overall increase utilization, and increased utilization is actually a hard data that your leadership team is going to look at and is going to add a lot of value into, like, hey, utilization went from 20 to 40%, for example, for the program. That is a really nice motivator for when you're trying to justify the costs that a wellness program has, or any solution that you're adding on top of it as well.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. And we're getting close to kind of. I'd love to leave some time for the audience here to ask some questions, um, but the topic that is very top of mind, is in all of kind of the tech ecosystem, and um, in both of our kind of platforms, and we talked a little bit kind of briefly before kind of coming on here, is AI. And so,
Mhm.
without going down kind of too far a rabbit hole, I'd love to get your kind of take on like what role does kind of AI play in wellness, and how has your team been kind of thinking about kind of where AI fits into the product and how that kind of plays a role in.
Mhm.
I think we can kind of keep this focus primarily kind of on wellness.
Yeah, of course. So I'll, like, once again answer in two parts. So the way that we leverage it at LifeSpeak is we're going to leverage it in terms of personalization and recommendation. So create it like more a persona, and using it as like a search tool on the platforms, rather than, we're not trying to replace the human aspect of the platforms, right? So we're not trying to create AI content. We will still and forever work with experts that are talking in their own language, and it's their text. It's something that they created. We leverage AI more as a tool and not as a foundation of what we do, right? People crave that human connection, and we're not trying to replace that. We're trying to make it more accessible and less intimidating for someone to actually reach out and talk about their mental health or their wellness overall. So we leverage AI really simply as a tool to help personalize and create a bigger story, if you want, in understanding the person that is doing some research on the different solutions that we have. And in terms of like the wellness programs, I think AI can be a very powerful tool when it comes to being something that supports you and that you can brainstorm and help you draft up a lot of communication in a shorter amount of time. So I think it's a time saving tool. I don't think it should. My golden rule, and that's always gonna what I said, is like, you have two ways that you can use AI if you're using it in the workplace. It's gonna be 80% that you create and it enhanced by 20, or you ask 20% and then you modify by 80% of what was produced and sent back to you with AI. So it's really leveraging it as something that can help you test things more quickly if you're trying to set up some OKRs, using AI to try to generate some ideas. This is really where you can find some help creating a deck, whatever it is, but don't try to replace the human aspect of it, because wellness and people crave that human connection. So I think using it as a replacement or creating some message, for example, like, keep the human aspect of it, use it as a tool. And I think it's a mistake not to use it as a tool, right? So it's there, we have to live with it, but really focusing on using it to enhance what you already have.
Cool. Yeah, I love that. I think our team is really thinking about where we can leverage AI within our tool to provide our kind of HR administrators with more insights into where kind of like recognition is happening within the organization, who within the organization might be kind of recognition kind of champions, who might be kind of like high performers, what sort of at the individual level, what
Mhm.
sort of maybe at kind of like the kind of regional or kind of like location level, department level, um, and where recognition might be kind of lacking, right? Like who might be at risk of leaving the organization, and
Yeah.
where they might need to kind of like focus some of their administrative efforts, communication efforts. Hey, let's let's get a hold of these people and highlight some of the benefits of recognition, so that
Mhm.
um, we do our best to kind of retain people in these areas of the business. So that's kind of where we're thinking about kind of leveraging
Hmm.
kind of AI within our product. If folks have questions for Clara here, I really encourage you to kind of like put them in the chat here, just as we kind of think about kind of wrapping up. We'd love to kind of answer those for you. And Clara, as we're waiting to see if we've got any kind of questions to answer. What as we've covered a lot of ground here, what would be kind of, if you're kind of thinking about leaving the audience kind of with one kind of takeaway from kind of today's discussion?
Hmm.
um, we've talked a lot about kind of like employee well-being programs, and how to kind of communicate the impact of those programs to our executive teams. um, what would be kind of like a really interesting takeaway for the audience?
My main takeaway would definitely be that if business is evolving, and we have AI, we have new tools, that also means that business is evolving. And the biggest shift that we've seen is that investing in your people is actually the proper way to do business, and you get more in the longer term when you invest in your people. So it's not just being a perks, it's actually a performance driver that you set up for yourself, and you can attract more talent, you retain your talent, but you also the employees that you have are actually going to be performing well when they feel seen, valued, and supporting. It goes from just retention to actually actual results.
Fabulous. And if folks want to, well, actually, maybe before we get there, I'd love to share my takeaway. I love
Of
making
course.
like a bunch of notes here, but I'm going to talk to my team about this because I thought it was really cool. We don't actually do this, but um, trying to identify those kind of like silent. I mean, you called them kind of like the silent champions, but these are like your high performers that are kind of on
Mhm.
their way to becoming kind of like leaders, managers, um, and giving them, or trying to shine a light on them in a way, saying like, hey, you're going to be great at this wellness thing or this recognition thing. How do we tell your story,
Mhm.
and shine a light on you, so that the rest of the organization, both currently, but also as you kind of move into kind of like that manager role, um, can learn from you, and can see the impact that you're having, right? And so I really like that, because we kind of do that. Well, we do that with managers, but we haven't kind of gone that level down into the organization. So I really like that one. We do have a question here. So Jerry says, how can we leverage Guusto toward the ideas Clara discussed? How can we leverage Guusto toward the ideas Clara discussed? I'm not sure I fully understand the question, Jerry. Maybe you can kind of expand for us. Can we leverage Guusto toward the ideas? I mean, we discussed a lot of ideas. um, Not sure where to go with this. How can we leverage Guusto toward the ideas Clara discussed? Clara, any thoughts on where Jerry might be going with this one?
And it really depends of which idea, because I feel like I've provided quite a few golden nuggets here. So if we go, why don't we go with what your main takeaway is? So leveraging and finding those silent, if you want, those, or my favorite word is the underdog. It's that person that works in silence, that spy, if you want, that is leading your team without you noticing as a manager, or normally the managers notice, right? So how can you actually leverage Guusto to actually recognize and reward those high performers?
Sounds good to me. I might just need a little bit more clarity, Jerry, if you can. Feel free to kind of expand on your question there, and I'm happy to answer. How can we use Gusto more? Would the rewards be just monetary? Still, I'm still a little bit unclear, Jerry. And I'm happy to kind of, if you want to follow up with us directly, we can kind of get answers for you. Claire, if folks want to kind of connect with you directly, is LinkedIn kind of the best way to connect with you there? If
Absolutely. Yeah, because as you can see, my name is a handful. So my email address is a handful. So LinkedIn would be perfect. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to connect. And as you can see, I'm quite open to talking. So don't be strangers.
how do we pronounce your last name there, just for people that are listening on audio?
Beaudry-Narbonne.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and for folks looking for the website there, it's just lifespeak.com. And again, if folks want to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Skai Dalziel there. It's also it's a difficult name if anybody's listening, kind of on audio. But the website guusto2use.com, and we actually have an executive pitch kit, which is a great resource if you're looking to find ways to yeah, just sell your executive teams on the benefits of a recognition program. And so you can kind of find that there at the link, and we'll put that in the show notes. Clara, thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you for
Jerry,
having me.
if you want to connect with us directly there, please do reach out to our team, and happy to kind of follow up with you and get you some answers there. But we're right at the top of the hour. We nailed the timing.
Perfect.
Have a wonderful day. We like to say mucho gusto, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody on the next one.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
All right.